So, before we begin our event, I do want to acknowledge a few people and a few organizations. First one I want to acknowledge is the amazing and terrific Plymouth Public Library Foundation. Their dedication, we're able to have wonderful and amazing programs like this evening. So thank you very much for your continued support. I also want to acknowledge an amazing independent bookstore here in Plymouth. And I really want to just stress the importance of an independent bookstore. You can go on to Amazon very quickly to purchase your books, but these bookstores are unique and they have a specific character about them. And it means a lot. They pour their heart and soul to be providing books and author talks and story times and other programs to the community. And that's very important. Whether it be an unlikely story in Plainville, very whimsical, or the really underdog, terrific bookstore in Maryville, Tennessee, Southland Books, they have this wonderful character about them. So I urge you, after this evening, to support your local bookstore. In this case, we have an amazing bookstore, Book Love, and this time I do want to introduce the owner of Book Love, Katie Mannix.
Well, I am so floored. This is a big deal for us. Hank, this is our largest crowd in the library, this very new partnership that we have, being a very new bookstore ourselves. And I could not be more honored than to introduce this absolutely incredible woman to you. Before I do, though, I know I heard a phone a moment ago, and such that we can all be totally present, I would just remind you, if you could take a second to go ahead and mute your phone, that would be wonderful. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. And then just to piggyback off of Manny's opening remarks, I'm often asked, was it a dream of mine to open a bookstore? And the answer is no. It wasn't, it was not. But I will say that there have been bookstores in my life that play an outsized role in shaping who I am today. But honestly, it was interactions in my early 20s that all kept pointing me to the need for civic engagement and the cultivation of community. And we can talk about that, and there's a lot of things trying to do that at big macro levels, but we are just humans. And there's something very beautiful in being a human of a very defined shape and size, and in seeking out humanity. And so I opened a bookstore to go ahead and bring humanity back into the fold and create a place where we can be humans together. So that is why we do what we do, and we invite you to come share in the stories that we cultivate for you and that we serve up for you. We're happy to do it. All right, but enough of that. Hank Phillippi Ryan. Yeah. Hank Phillippi Ryan is the USA Today best-selling author of 16 psychological thrillers, winning the most prestigious awards in the genre, including 5 Agathas, 5 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She is also the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV and has won an unprecedented 37 Emmys, as well as dozens more honors for her groundbreaking journalism. Those numbers are clearly remarkable, but here's the very cool thing about Hank and her work. It has changed laws, it has changed lives, and has resulted in millions of dollars in refunds and restitutions for consumers. In her second career as a writer, something we can figure out later, national book critics call her a superb and gifted storyteller and a master of creating suspenseful mysteries. She is past president of National Sisters in Crime and is now on the board of International Thriller Writers. She lives in Massachusetts with her husband, a nationally renowned criminal defense and civil rights attorney. Her newest novel, which we're going to introduce to you tonight, is a cross-country cat and mouse chase. All This Could Be Yours from Minotaur Books. People magazine calls it a nail-biting thriller, And rave star reviews from library journals say it should be on everyone's reading list, and I couldn't agree more. Hank, so glad to have you.
Is she not the best? Is Book Love not the best? Thank you, Katie, for doing this, and for everyone at Book Love and the library. It is so perfect that I am here at the library in conjunction with the bookstore, and you will hear more about that as I talk a little bit about All This Could Be Yours. Let me tell you, though, quickly, this is the launch day. This is the international launch moment for this book, All This Could Be Yours. This is what, thank you. I couldn't be happier to be sharing this with you. You know, we as writers, I sit in my little study at my desk that my mom gave me, an antique hunt table that my mom gave me 1,000,000 years ago, and look out the bay window at the big sugar maple tree and watch the squirrels and watch the blue jays. And for a year, I hear imaginary voices in my head, and I am making things up by myself. So the idea of being able to share the product of that labor, the fruits of that labor, the results of that labor, that gorgeous story, this is a moment for every author when we say, do you want to dance? Do you want to dance with this book? I have created a dance partner for you. And every book is different depending on who's reading it. So I'm offering you my half of the story, and then I can't wait to hear what your other half of the story turns out to be, how it works through your consciousness, how it works through your idea of a story, who you root for and who you don't root for so much, and whether you can figure out the ending, which you will not be able to do. So let me tell you, I've been a television reporter for 43 years. I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise. And I love my job as a reporter. But I have to tell you, one thing that I've really learned over all these years is my darling husband and I don't celebrate the anniversary of the day we met. We do not. We celebrate the anniversary of the day before we met. And we call that You Never Know Day. Because you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner, right? Isn't that true? We wake up every morning and it is a brand new world. We don't know what is about to happen, and we need to learn to embrace that. Even when something terrible happens, something wonderful is around the corner, and my whole life has been like that. I grew up in really rural Indiana, so rural that you couldn't see another house from our house. And speaking of libraries, my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library. Can you picture that? And we'd fill up the saddlebags with books and read up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house. And that is where I fell in love with storytelling. That's where I fell in love with Nancy Drew. You read Nancy Drew, right? Tell me you did. The clue in the old clock, right? And the clue in the diary, which I thought was clue in the dairy for quite a long time. And I was reading it thinking, shouldn't there be cows? I don't know. I figured it out finally. I figured it out. Then I read all Niall Marsh and Josephine Tay and Marjorie Allingham and Dorothy Sayers, all the wonderful British women, golden age authors. And then I remember so profoundly reading Murder on the Orient Express. How many of you have read Murder? Okay, the rest of you, really? So I won't tell you the ending. I won't tell you the ending. But I remember I was about 14, and I read the ending of that book, and I thought, how did Agatha Christie do that, right? How did she come up with this perfect, gorgeous, surprising but inevitable ending that we could have figured out if only we were as smart as Agatha Christie, but nobody is as smart as Agatha Christie. So it was absolutely shocking and surprising and lovely and delightful. And I remember thinking, maybe I was 13 or so. Remember thinking, maybe someday I could be a mystery writer. And then the other half of my brain thought, maybe I should be a detective. Instead of writing about a detective, I could be a detective. Instead of writing about Miss Marple or Poirot, I could be Miss Marple or Poirot. So it's so hilarious that after all these years, I became a detective, essentially covering true crime for television and doing all those stories for television, following leads and tracking down clues and going after bad guys. And then, you know, after 30 years as a reporter, I started the second half of my life in crime fiction. But you know, but life is not linear, as you know. Things do not ever go as we planned. And to talk about never knowing what wonderful thing is around the next corner or what triumph will come from adversity. And there are moments in our lives, I think, where pivotal things happen. And we don't know they're going to be pivotal at the moment. We don't know until later. And that one of those things happened to me when I was about 14. I was the most bookish, nerdy, unpopular little girl you can possibly imagine in the world. No dates, no fun, no prom, no friends, no anything. All I did was study and watch old movies and read mysteries. That is all I did. So I don't know if they still have them now, but back in the day, they had the superlatives: best dressed, most likely to succeed, most popular, those kinds of things. I didn't get voted any of those things. I was voted, at age 14, I was voted most individual. Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that. I knew what most individual meant. Most individual, you know, when you're 14, you just want to be like everyone else. Don't brand me with most individual, right? I knew what that meant. It meant most unlike the rest of us. It meant most misfit. It meant most weird. It meant we don't want to sit with you at lunch, is what that meant. And I was so unhappy. I was so in distress. You know, I was doomed as only a 14-year-old girl can be. And I went home and I said to my mom, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. The world isn't fair. They can't do this to me. This is just not fair. And my mom comforted me, as moms do, if we're lucky. But then later, she took me aside and she said, listen, kiddo, you're griping that the world isn't fair. She said, let me tell you, honey, the world isn't fair. She said, and you're just gonna have to get used to it. And I remember that day, even then, at age 14, I remember thinking, why? Why do I have to get used to it? Why can't I make a difference? Why can't I make a change? Why can't I make the world be not that why can't I make the world be not that way? Why can't I make the world be more fair? And I vowed even then that when I grew up, I was going to do something that would leave a mark, that would change the world, that would leave some sort of a legacy, that it would have it matter that I lived, that I had this one life. And you'll hear more about that in a minute. So I was a Shakespeare major in college. As I said, things aren't linear. I was a Shakespeare major in college, much to my parents' absolute chagrin. I remember my father was like, oh, honey, you are absolutely going to be unemployable. You know, you are skillless here. But I loved it. But after college, I decided, okay, time to change the world. So I hesitate to tell you this, but it's a long time ago, I decided to go into politics. And I worked for, I know you just groaned. I worked for several political campaigns back home in Indiana. But sadly, not one candidate I ever worked for actually won. Yeah, that's how it goes. And at that moment, I realized, if you listen to the universe, as I do, the universe was saying to me, find another career, right? Because this one isn't working for you. So it was 1970, and it's very important that you remember this. It was 1970. You never know what's around the next corner. 1970, I walked into the biggest radio station in Indianapolis. I was 20. And I said to the news director, I'm here to apply for the job as a radio reporter. And the news director said, that's great. We do need a reporter. Where was your last radio reporting job? So I said, well, no, you know, I've never had a radio reporting job. And he says, that's fine, that's fine. Where was your last television reporting job? Never had a television reporting job. He says, that's fine, that's okay. Newspaper reporter? No. Magazine reporter? No. He's looking at me very skeptically. He says, did you go to journalism school? I said, no. He said, have you ever taken a journalism class? I said, no. He said, when you were a little girl, did you hand out mimeographed newspapers door to door in your neighborhood, anything? Well, I had nothing. I had nothing. So finally he says, look, you seem like a very nice young woman, and I know I could teach you how to be a reporter, but I just don't have time to do that. He said, and so besides, you are supremely unqualified for this job. He said, can you give me one good reason why I should hire you? And I said, well, yes, I can give you a good reason why you should hire me. I said, your license is up for renewal at the Federal Communications Commission right now, and you don't have any women working here. And then I just smiled, and the next day I had my first job in broadcasting. Now, I tell you that, couple things about that. One, I do not recommend threatening your potential employer with a federal lawsuit on the first day of your job interview. This is not a good idea, although this was 1970 and the EEOC laws had just changed, and it happened to work for me. Do not try this at home. The other thing I love about it, when I think about that story, is that I was really brave that day. You know, I was naive, of course, and confident, as only a 20-something person can be, but I was really brave. And I took a chance that day, and I found my calling. Think about that. If I hadn't been brave, I would not be standing here today. You know, and Jane Pauley calls us the class of 1970. The women who started in broadcasting in 1970, Jane Pauley, Leslie Stahl, Barbara Walters, Jessica Savage, all of us, and not only in television, but in any realm of society, the women who started out in the 1970s, like I did, were sort of breaking the gender barrier in broadcasting and breaking the gender barrier in their own fields. And I really feel proud to be part of that moment in time, of that moment in history where we changed the world for journalism. You know, when I speak to journalism classes now, I say to the women in the classes, here's how I started. But it won't work for you, right? Because we made a difference. If I walked into Channel 7 right now and said, you should hire me because I'm a woman, they'd say, so's everybody else in this building, sister, right? My boss is a woman, and her boss is a woman, and her boss is a woman. But we changed the world, and we made a difference. And it shows you, I always think about this a little bit too, why now that we're all grown up, why are we not brave anymore? Why, you know, the experience is supposed to teach us bravery, not fear. But now we think we know so much and we say, oh, I can't try that. I can't do that. I shouldn't start that. It's too late. It's too late for me. No, 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 be brave. I think about this every day because being brave can change our lives. And as I said, I've been in television, I've been a reporter every day since that moment at that radio station. You know, we found horrible problems in the 911 system that were leading police and firefighters to the wrong addresses in Massachusetts. Thousands of times a year you call for police or fire or an ambulance and it goes to the wrong place. Thousands of times a year in Massachusetts, and we found out why that was happening and got that changed. We found firehouses, the places where firefighters live and work, in such terrible shape that they did not pass fire inspection, the firehouses, and we got millions of dollars appropriated from the legislature to fix up the fire stations. We found so many horrible problems in the mortgage lending and consumer lending consumer lending programs, that 3 new laws were changed to prohibit the things that we had uncovered. I got people's homes out of unfair foreclosure. I got people's homes back for them, and millions of dollars, as Katie said, millions of dollars in refunds and restitution. And I have to think, it's all because that little 14-year-old girl said, I'm gonna make the world a better place when I grow up. It's because of a bad thing that happened when I was young that changed my life forever and brought me here today, which is why, talk about you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. After one day at Channel 7, 20 years ago now, it's shocking to say, I had a good idea for a novel. You know how when you get a good idea and you just get goosebumps and you think, oh, this is gonna work. you know, this is a good idea. I had a good idea for a novel, and I came home and I said to my darling husband, sweetheart, I've got a great idea for a book. I'm going to write a novel. And Jonathan says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a novel? And I profoundly remember saying, how hard can it be? You know, I've read a million books. Well, I soon learned how hard it could be. But that turned out to be Prime Time, which was my first novel, which won the Agatha. Jay's read it. Prime Time, my first novel, which won the Agatha for Best First Novel. And that was the beginning of my career in crime fiction. You never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. And that is why I'm so delighted, thrilled, shocked, every single wonderful word you can possibly imagine, to be here with you tonight to talk about Book 16. On Pub Day of Book 16. My books are fast-paced, page-turning thrillers if you like Harlan Coben, Lisa Scottolini, Tess Gerritsen, Lisa Gardner, Lisa Jewell, Lisa Unger, Lisa, and Hank. You will love all this. Could be yours. My job is to keep you up late at night. My job is to have you miss your stop on the T because you just can't put the book down. All This Could Be Yours stars Tessa Calloway. And Tessa Calloway is a woman just like many of us, a happy wife and a mom, and she quits her job in the corporate world to follow her dreams and write a novel. At the very beginning of the book, we see Tessa live on Instagram where she says she's just had it with the corporate world. She's had it with being in meetings where she has a good idea and nobody listens to her, and then 10 minutes later, some, forgive me, man says the same idea and he's a genius. And she is tired. Yes, you look like you have had that happen to you. Okay. And she decides she's going to quit and follow her dreams to be an author, which she does. 3 years later, as the book opens, Tessa has a surprise blockbuster bestseller. Tessa is on tour for her book. She's sent by her publisher on a glamorous cross-country book tour with standing room only crowds and adoring fans and signing lines a mile long, and it's everything she ever dreamed of in her life. But in this book, Tessa begins to soon realize while she's on tour and away from home that she has a stalker, someone who is desperately out to ruin her career and destroy the loving family that she left back home. What's worse, Tessa fears that it is her fault, that this terror, this danger, this deadly chase is a result of a Faustian bargain, of what really felt like a deal with the devil that she made a long time ago. And she worries that this deal is about to come back to harm her. So what begins as a glamorous cross-country book tour turns into a deadly, dangerous cross-country cat and mouse chase with the author running for her life. And that is All This Could Be Yours. I've heard it described as a careful what you wish for thriller. Because when all your dreams come true, how far will you have to go to protect them? And how far will you have to go to keep your secrets? Now, it's so funny because it's so meta. Here I am on book tour. I'm an author on book tour with a book called All This Could Be Yours, which is about an author on book tour, and her book is called All This Could Be Yours. So it is super meta, and it is super personal, and it really came from my own experience. It was so funny. I was at the Poison Pen bookstore in Phoenix, in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is quite a haven for crime fiction authors, the Poison Pen bookstore. And I was signing books, as I hope I will do here later for every single one of you. No pressure, it's just my career. And the bookstore on the line. Anyway, I was signing books, and I signed one to someone that said, "So wonderful to see you in Scottsdale." And I put the date. And then I thought, wow, I've just given someone an alibi, right? That signature proves that I was there, and they were there, and the date, and where we were, and anybody could look up online and see what time it was, and they have a perfect alibi. And then I was thinking about all the other things that I write in books that seem so benign and so fine, like, thank you for a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for everything. Well, if someone had a nefarious idea, they could take my sign book and say, see, Hank said, thank you so much for a wonderful evening. Guess what we did? And they could just, right? They could just make something up out of whole cloth, some myth about what that signature means. And when I started thinking about that, I started thinking about every terrible thing that could possibly happen on book tour. I love book tour. It's exciting, it's marvelous, it's great. To meet readers and to meet writers and to meet booksellers and to meet librarians is definitely a dream come true. On the other hand, there's always that moment in an author session where someone says, does anyone have any questions? And there's this silence, and every time the author wonders, I hope someone isn't going to ask me a question that I don't want to answer. What if the author has a secret and someone in the audience might know it, and someone in the audience might be using that moment to ruin the author's career, that little moment of fear. And then I started thinking about, well, for instance, how did you know that I would be here tonight? You saw it at the bookstore, you saw it at the library, you saw it on social media, you saw it on my Instagram, on my Facebook, the library's Facebook and Instagram, the bookstore's Facebook and Instagram, all over social media. Everybody, I want you to know where I am. On the other hand, you know where I am all the time. And you also know where I'm not. And every single author has the same situation. We live and die by social media. We need you to know where we are. We put it on social media. We put up pictures of our pets and our Christmas decorations and our Thanksgiving turkey and everything about us. You know everything about us. And sometimes, you know why they're called fans, right? It comes from fanatic. Right, and when there is someone who goes just a little too far and decides, since you wrote a book that they love, that means you love them, and that means you're their friend, and that means they should know everything about you and be able to be with you and be able to know everything about your life and know where you are, and that you are their friend, and that is terrifying. I mean, I know authors who travel with bodyguards because they're so afraid of the public. They're so afraid of one in a million, that 1 in a million person. And that is what All This Could Be Yours is about. Think of the title, All This Could Be Yours, If Only. What has Tessa done to get what she has now? And how far will she go to keep it? And one more thing about the book is that Tessa's a good mom with a cool husband, we think, but she's trying to be a mom and a wife via Zoom and via FaceTime. And why isn't her husband showing her the house in the video? Why is he just showing his face in the video? She realizes that her husband is curating the video in his FaceTimes and Zooms and won't turn the camera to show where he is. Why is he doing that? All this could be yours. What would you have to give up to get what you want? Now, I'll tell you very quickly, and then I'd love to take some questions from you. I don't have any idea what happens in my books until I write the next line, the next word, the next paragraph, the next scene. I have no idea. So it's a surprise to me every day. So when people say, wow, the twists and turns of your novels, you really surprised me. I say, well, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? And talk about twists, talk about a surprise ending. I surprise myself every time. And that's what Sue Grafton used to call the magic of writing. The magic of writing, that we start with nothing but a little shred of our own imagination, and somehow, once upon a time, that blooms into a story. And I don't know how it works, and I don't know how it happens, but every day when I'm sitting at my computer, that's what gets me to the computer every day, because I think, I can't wait to find out what happens next. And that's the only way I can find out is to write it myself. It has been such a joy to have this career. It has been such a joy to start out as a television storyteller, telling a certain kind of story. and then evolve into a crime fiction writer where I can draw on my own imagination. You know, I can make something out of nothing. Think about that. I can make a story about just from a little spark of something. Do you know the musical Sunday in the Park with George, the Sondheim musical Sunday in the Park with George, about the French painter, impressionist, pointillist painter Georges Seurat? And there's a scene in Sunday in the Park with George where Seurat is on stage by himself with a blank sketch pad. And on it, he draws a hat. And he looks at it and says, look, I made a hat where there never, you remember? Look, I made a hat where there never was a hat. And he is singing, I'm not going to sing, but he's singing at that one moment. He realizes how he has created something out of nothing but his own imagination. He has created art. He has created beauty. He has created something tangible and shareable and gorgeous and precious out of nothing but his own imagination. And he's singing about how we as human beings are the only creatures who can do that. We can make art, we can make music, we can write novels out of nothing but our own imagination. And that is so special, and that is something I treasure, and that is something that I think about every day. What a joy it is to be able to tell a story, and what a joy it is to share a story with you. You know, when I finished my first book, I called my husband into the room and I said, sweetheart, watch this. And I typed the end. And then I burst into tears. I burst into tears because I knew at that moment, that little girl in the hayloft who had dreamed about being a writer, her dream had come true. My dream had come true. I had written my first novel, and it shows you, you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner. But of course I know now that I shouldn't have cried when I typed the end, because it wasn't the end at all, right? It was the beginning of this wonderful new second half of my life and career. And I am so honored that you came here tonight to share that with me. Thank you so much for being here. I would love to take some questions. Now I feel really terrified. If anybody knows some secrets about me, don't ask about that. Anybody have some easy, non-controversial questions? Yes.
Did you ever get back in touch with that radio station and tell them you made it?
Well, you know, that's so cute. Did I ever get back in touch with the radio station and tell them I made it? He really gave me a chance to be a reporter. I mean, he just didn't have to. And I remember I went home for the first week or so as a reporter. I went home every night and I was sobbing, just sobbing, because I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was bluffing through this entire thing, and then I had to actually do it, and I realized that I didn't know how. And one day, after about a week, I remember going to work and saying, I love this. I love this. This is storytelling. I know how to do this. And I will know, his name was Fred Heckman. He was so cute. He used to have keys and change in his pocket that he would jangle all the time because he was so nervous and freaked out. And you know, stressed. I should have learned something from how stressed out Fred Heckman was all the time. But there are people in all of our lives who say yes to us at a very pivotal moment. And I love that you brought him up, because that was someone who said yes to me when he didn't have to, and completely changed the course of my life as a result. He died a while ago, and I had talked to him afterward, and he knew how grateful I am for that. My English teacher who taught me about Shakespeare, the first photographer who worked with me at my first job and my first television station in 1975 in Indianapolis, who said, stand here, say this, hold the mic this way, don't be afraid, all those kinds of things. We never know what gift we're going to give to someone, and that is such a major part of my life. Nobody's ever asked me that. Thank you. Who else has a question? Yes.
How much class have you ever gone back to
Have I ever gone back to the class reunion? I just love you. That's so great. Yes, I did. You know, I should tell you that as a result of being voted most individual, They put my picture in the school paper upside down. They did. I have it. And so I was so happy to go back to that reunion. I can't begin to tell you. I took my mother's car. I have to say, she had a Jaguar at the time. It wasn't my car at all. And I just drove up in that little car with a black dress. And everybody, it was so funny. I can talk to you about this. Everybody was so, oh, you know, we always knew you would turn out to be wonderful. Can you imagine? And I'm like, where were you when I needed a date for the prom? You know, that's all. But it's all fine. It's all water under the bridge. High school was horrible, right? And so we all have to go through that rite of passage. And now we're all friends again. Good. It was really a good moment, though, I have to say. Although, I will tell you that I was really nervous about going because class reunions are kind of fraught. And it was my, 40th reunion? Something like that. And I remember going to the ballroom where it was. And I tentatively opened the door, and I saw the people in the room, and I thought, oh, I'm in the wrong place. These are all somebody's parents. Yeah, they were. Yeah. But so weren't we all, but it was great. It was great. Who else has a question? Not about my secrets. Oh, yes, Jay. Do you know that Jay Roberts is a rock star music critic and has been a pal of mine since day one, right? Since prime time. Okay, now you're a troublemaker, though. What question do you have?
Between the blank screen on day one and then the finished product, during the editing process, was there anything in the story that you had to lose that you regret?
Oh, between the blank screen, between nothing and the finished product, was there anything that I had to lose from the book that I regret? Absolutely not. No, and I will tell you why. It's kind of interesting because since I don't have any idea what's going to happen next in the novel, I just advance the story, I just see what happens, I just go on, and at about 3/4 of the way through, I think, oh, that's what this book is about. Oh, I see what the theme is. Oh, I see what might have happened. And so then I power through to the end. It's generally 120,000 words at that point. A book is usually, my books are usually 100,000 words, so I know 20,000 words are going to have to go. And there is nothing I look forward to more than cutting those 20,000 words. Because when I edit the book down to the size that it's supposed to be, what I'm doing is taking away everything that isn't the book. And I discover, I unearth, I excavate the book that I meant to write. And it is a treasure hunt. It is the joy of my life to do that cutting. You know, someone said, oh, you have to kill your darling words. And I think they are not my darling words. If they're clogging the pacing, if they're making the story be slow, you've read books like that where you think, come on, is something gonna happen? And so I love the editing so much. Tens of thousands of words I take out of my book, and bye-bye to all of them. And people say, well, do you at least save them for the next time? No, I don't. You know, they're derivative, repetitive, like me trying to be a good writer, me trying to be funny, me trying to be clever, too much yammering, too much indecision, too much scenery, it all goes. I just want a good, solid page-turning story. But that cutting process that you refer to, that's the ball game. You know, that's what makes the book be what it is. And so, you know, I don't want you to turn the channel when my stories are on TV. And I don't want you to be able to put my books down when you're reading them. And that storytelling process, that rhythm, that metabolism is exactly the same. So that's the fun part. That is the fun part. One more question, Katie? 2? 3. Okay, one here.
With the complexities of the storyline and all the different perspectives, how difficult is it, or is it difficult to land on a title?
Oh, with the complexity of the storyline and all the perspectives, how difficult is it to land on a title? It's just such a cool moment to get the title, first of all. All this could be yours, because again, it's just us. I had that title before I knew anything about the story.
Is that always the case with all your books?
No. So in this case, I had a title before the story. The book that I'm writing now, I have the whole story and no title. My book, The Murder List, I had the title, I thought, oh, that's a cool title, wonder what that's about. And you just write the book to be that. So the inspiration comes at different times. My book, One Wrong Word, that was always one wrong word. You know, one wrong word can ruin your life. It's about sort of a public relations fixer who sort of knits up the problems that executives and politicians and movie stars have when they say something wrong. One wrong word, and one wrong word can ruin your life, and that was kind of perfect. So sometimes titles present themselves instantly. Sometimes we really wrangle over them, but always, always, the secret of the title, I have learned, is that it is in the book somewhere. There's a phrase or a bit of dialogue or a sentence or something where once you find it, you know, like digging, like mining for gold, it's there. Like, I always can't wait to find the title. It makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. Does it matter to you? You know, do you see a book with, like, if you go into Book Love and you're scanning, what do you look at? The cover, the title, what do you see? Back of the cover. What else? Who else? Cover people? Title people? Art?
Repeat author.
Repeat author, okay. What else? Genre. So you're looking for a thriller like this? And that's why bookstores have sections. So you can zoom right to the thriller section and find something fabulous. Who else had a question? I think there's two more. Yes?
How long from start to finish the writing process, and how long the editing process?
Yes, the writing, the whole thing is constrained by my contract with the publisher in New York. And they say, your book is due on, I'm making this up, November the 1st. And from whatever day it is that day to November the 1st, that is how long it takes to write the book. It takes maybe, if we're saying a year, if we're saying a year for the whole process, it takes maybe 7 months to write the best first draft I can, and then maybe 2 months for editing. What are we up to, 9? Then it goes back to the editor. She looks at it. Have you ever seen, and she sends me the edit letter. Do you know about edit letters? When an author sends their first draft of a manuscript to the editor reads it. It's sort of your writing partner and the publisher. And they send you back a letter that has their thoughts about changes for the novel. So I get back these letters from my editor, Kristen, who is a genius, genius, genius. I love working with her. And they'll say, Dear Hank, oh my goodness, this is the best book you have ever written. This is fabulous. This is wonderful. I'm so honored to be the first person who has ever read this book. I cannot wait to share it with the world. I have just a couple of thoughts. And then there's 14 single-space pages of her thoughts. And every one of them is fabulous. Every one of them is fabulous. And I think I've learned also in all these years as a reporter, which is very collaborative with a producer and with an editor and with a videographer and with the news director and with the legal department and with everybody in the world. You're always working together. And one of the things I've learned is the joy of collaboration. And that when someone is working on a project with you and they just want the project to be the best it can be, and that's their goal, that is wonderful. One of the biggest lessons I've ever learned in my entire life is that I could be wrong, right? And once you realize, I could be wrong though, so tell me what you think. That's how we grow, that's how we learn, that's how we get better, and that's the process. So it takes a year from start to finish. More than you ever wanted to know, right? She just wanted me to say, 8 months. That's all. Thank you. Last question, yes?
Do you ever let your family members read a book before you send it in?
Do I ever let my family members read a book before I send it in? Jonathan, my husband Jonathan, who's right there looking, what word is that? Patient. Turns out, he's a lawyer. He's a wonderful, fabulous criminal defense and civil rights attorney. Turns out to be the best editor imaginable, not to mention the best proofreader. A genius proofreader. His mom was an assistant principal in a high school in New York, and I think you got the English teacher genes or whatever it was from her. But I always let Jonathan read my books, and he has this way of saying, why doesn't she just call the police, And that's wise, you know, then I have to figure out why she doesn't call the police. Jonathan is really the only person that I let read the books before, because I hate to say this, but everybody's gonna have an opinion, you know, everybody. An old pal of mine said, anybody that can change something that you've written will change it. So I just think I got, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think I got this. My editor and I will do this with a little help from Jonathan. And there was one more question.
I'm just curious if you had a little Annabelle in your head that would come through when you were waffling about which way to go.
You've read the book, thank you. Thank you. Annabelle is the main character in my fictional main character, Tessa Calloway's fictional fiction. Her fictional main character is Annabelle Brown. And Annabelle, let me just fast forward a little bit to say that one of the things that happens if you're lucky as an author, and you know this, and others who are writers here know this, is that sometimes when you're not trying to make it happen, the characters really do speak to you. Not like, hi Hank, what are you doing? But sort of, I would never say that. Or I'm not going there. Or why don't I just call the police? You know, that again. And you can't, if you are really in the zone, your character will not let you write something that is, and I realized what this meant, that is out of character. Do you see what that means now? That was such a revelation to me. So my characters, my goal is to allow them to be real. And once you allow, you're not making the character, you're allowing the character. Once you allow the character to be real, then they have their own agenda and their own intention, and they will reveal that. And that's what you're looking for. So yes, some people call it the muse, right? Some people call it imagination. Some people call it writer magic. I don't know what to call it. I just embrace it when it happens, and it is. This is a wonderful way to end. It's the joy of my life when a story that was just a tiny little bit of my imagination blooms into book reality. And that is what's happened with All This Could Be Yours. And thank you so much for your really perceptive, wonderful, thoughtful questions. It has been a real joy to be with you. Let me say what my agent always tells me to say. A signed book makes a great gift. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you all so much. I also, in my enthusiasm, was remiss and failed to thank the exceptional Plymouth Public Library and the Plymouth Public Library Foundation, which should go without saying because they're incredible institutions that work to help create events like this in partnership with us, and we're grateful. And Hank, so grateful to you and to Jonathan for making the trip down this evening. Again, Hank Phillippi Ryan, people.